My name is John Wildman. I'm the editor-in-chief of FilmsGoneWild.com, and on this segment of Films Gone Wild, we're going to be talking about the short documentary films Defending the Dark and Wiley's Last Resort. We have with us from Defending the Dark, Tara Roberts Zabriskie. She's the director and producer of that film, and from Wiley's Last Resort, Evan Mascagni. He's the director of that film. Welcome to the show, you guys. All right, we always start off by having our filmmakers introduce the audience to the film. So, Tara, why don't you start? Tell us about Defending.
The film is called Defending the Dark, and it's about preserving the dark skies, particularly in Maine, but it really applies anywhere. And it's about the effects that light pollution has on our environment and our health and our safety, and ways we can easily fix it in our own backyard.
Okay, Evan, you're up.
Wiley's Last Resort is a short documentary about an Appalachian writer and poet and DJ and Renaissance man who is defending the mountains that he loves.
You know, I wanted to pair the two of you together in your films because there is both a personal application to this, and they're also, in their own ways, call to action documentaries. And in fact, last night on the red carpet, I was teasing you because I said we're on the red carpet with our bright lights, and is that upsetting you? Because there's a very specific in the documentary which lights are okay, which lights we'd like to get rid of, because they're screwing with wildlife and our own health. But Tara, I would like you to start to talk about that aspect of one, literally being educational, and two, inspiring us to take action without browbeating us to take action. Like, you know, there's a nuance and there's a finesse to doing so. So talk about the challenge of that.
Yeah, when I approached this film, I did not want it to be beat over the head. This is what you have to do. This is what you must do. And there is an element to that, but hopefully I balanced it out enough with inspirational stories and imagery of why are we protecting the night sky? Tell me the time of how it's important to you. And so, for instance, I interviewed a Native American from up there in Maine, and he connected me to the native traditions of how they're connected to the night sky. And then just talking to other people about going out and camping and that awe, that moment of just being like, wow, I love it. And so I'm hoping that I was able to weave in enough of that, okay, this is why we're doing it, and then also have an element of, all right, now here's how to do it. And I'm hoping that I made that balance appropriately. And I think I did. I've gotten really good response when we've shown it. And like you said, this is a call to action kind of film. And we've been able to show it to community screenings in small towns. And people have come out of it inspired, saying, oh, I never thought of that. I didn't realize. I'm going to go home and look at my lights. And so I feel like the film is doing what it needs to do, and it's speaking to people in a way that's inspiring and informative.
And Evan, I've had a conversation earlier today talking about when you have a central focused person in your film, as a documentarian, you feel a responsibility toward taking care of their image, in every delineation, of that, as well as tell the story. And I would love for you to talk about that, about presenting. You're literally introducing us to a man, and so there's that. But there's also putting forward the message that he would want you to put forward. So talk about balancing those two aspects.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, I think maybe 10 years ago I was more one of the beat 'em over the head type of filmmakers, where it's like, hey, I'm right, you're wrong, this is why I'm right, watch this film, it'll explain it. But I think I was a little young and immature, and that's not the best way to change people's hearts and minds. And so now I look for stories and for characters that, do that in their own way and don't beat themselves over their heads, because it's not so black and white and life is more gray and complex. And Jim Webb is one of those people who, he says in the film, I'm a friend of miners and mountains, right? It's not just so black and white, we hate coal mining, we hate strip mining. And he sort of is a man that talks about those complexities and acknowledges them. And really, that's what my hope with the film is just to get a conversation going, right? That there's no right or wrong answer here, but just to get people talking about this issue. And yeah, he's such a great person to to start that conversation.
I would love for both of you to talk about doing documentaries in short form. Because there's enough of a challenge doing a feature-length documentary. But when you're doing that, runtime is so precious when we're doing shorts, because you go, well, a programmer for a film festival says, well, if your film is a certain length, then the entire damn block has to be dependent on your film. Like, it's got to be built around your film. And yet, but you've got a story to tell. So you go, 5 minutes is all the difference in the world for trying to do what you're trying to do. So talk about working within the constraints of your run times. You start, Evan.
Yeah, this is the first short film I've directed in a while. I normally do features, and it is so much more of a challenge because you want people to know your central person you're following and empathize with them and understand their perspective and where they're coming from, and you're trying to cram all that into, in my case, 17 minutes. So it's a real challenge, and especially with someone like Jim, who's since passed away since I made the film, you really want to make sure you do it right and honor their legacy and honor them as a person. And yeah, I think in a lot of ways a short is more difficult in a feature in that regard, right? To try and get that audience connection with your central figure in such a short period of time and get them to feel a real connection. So,
Tara.
Yeah, so this is interesting. When I set out to do this film, I wanted it to be 20 minutes. And that was my goal, because I wanted it to be short and educational, where it could be lend itself well to like a classroom or a presentation at like a library or something. And I went out and I got all these interviews, and I came back and I had 55 minutes that I wanted to keep. And I said, okay, well, that's not going to work. I could have spent another couple weeks filming and then made a feature out of it, but I felt like I didn't have the time or the resources to do that, so I had to cut. And so I actually kept cutting and cutting, and I got it down to 35 minutes, where I was really happy. And it felt natural there at 35 minutes. And I showed it to some people, and they said, that's a fantastic, it felt good. And so that's actually my full film is 35 minutes. What's showing here at the Oxford Film Festival is a 15-minute cut. And because, like you said, film festivals are looking for that 10 to 15-minute film so they can put a whole bunch of shorts together. So the 15-minute film has worked really well for this film festival, but it's nice that I have a 30-minute film to go out and tell the whole story and start that conversation. And actually, the 35-minute film I had to cut down again because it got accepted to PBS stations. And
that's a good reason to have to do that.
It was a really good reason, and they needed it to be 28:00.
The last question I have for the two of you is that when you do the subjects that the two of you have in these films, oftentimes, again, when you hit the film festival circuit and you're doing a tour or whatever, you become the spokespeople. You become the people that know everything about that subject to someone like me or someone in the audience, and so and we're not always comfortable with that. Sometimes it's a learned talent to go, okay, I've got to be the talking head as well as have been the director, because I live with this subject and I do know all this stuff. But I would love for both of you to talk about how comfortable you are with that. You're the expert on light now. You're the expert on strip mining now, right? And so, whether you wanted to be or not, or whether you feel you are or not, you kind of are now. So how is that for you? Are you okay with that?
It was a challenge. I like my films, the characters in my films to be able to speak themselves, and I don't really like to be able to take on what they're saying. But I think my topic was, I don't want to say it's simple enough, but I had experts in my film that were really good at breaking down the basics and saying, okay, this is the problem and this is the solution. and I was able to sort of dissect what they told me and then be able to regurgitate it to an audience. Now, sometimes a question does come up that I don't know the answer to. And that's been tough, and I've said, well, you've got to go to this website to figure that out. But I've actually lucked out where I've been able to do a lot of screenings with experts in my film. And so they've been there, and if I don't know the answer, I can be like, oh, well, Doug knows the answer because he's the astrophysicist that actually understands this on a deeper level. So it's challenging, but I'm happy that people are curious and asking those questions, and at least I'm hoping that that conversation is started, and then they can go on and research it more.
And at least in your case, you could also have that handout from the screen of that one grid that you have in the film, too.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
So.
Yes. There is a very handy form that says these are the 7 things that you need to do.
Evan doesn't get that benefit.
I do not, and I'm not an expert in strip mining or Kentucky or Appalachia in general, but it was important for me to collaborate with folks who are, and so my co-collaborator Shawn and Apple Shop, who's been making movies and media in the mountains since over 50 years, they are much more experts in this issue. So it was important for me to make sure I had the right collaborators to tackle an issue like this, because this is such a complex issue and there's so many different perspectives. And yeah, I mean, what I wanted to do was just honor this man that was a hero of mine, as someone I looked up to and profoundly changed my life in the short period of time that I knew him, and just try and do that in the best way we could.
Well, you definitely did honor him, because it's a really nice job. Again, the film is Miley's Last Resort. The director, Evan Mascagni, has been with us, and Defending the Dark with Tara Roberts Zabriskie, director and producer of the film. Thank you for talking to us about the films.